So welcome to customizing your REA database. You should be able to see my screen here, and we're going to go over a few things about how to customize your REA to make your day-to-day usage of REA a lot more powerful and also simple to use, easy to view, and so on. So the first thing I'm going to talk about are the different tables that you're able to customize the selections from. So in different parts of REA, such as, for example, properties, there's different tables that you can add to. So for example, here under properties, there's a field for property type. That's a field that you're able to add different property types to, since it's just a selectable list. So you're not able to just generically type into there. So if you go up to the Tools menu in your REA and you go to System Tables, you have a few different options here. There's event types, so in addition to like phone call, meeting, and so on, you can set up custom event types as well. One example is that we actually, instead of just using phone call, we either use incoming call or outgoing call, so we can actually track which type of phone call it is, whether it's an incoming call or outgoing call is important to us. So you can add different event types through that. Project setup allows you, I'll actually go into that one in a moment, but it allows you to add different statuses and such to the different project types, which probably make a lot more sense when I actually go into the section there. And then in this sense, we have property types. So in this list that comes up for property types, it shows all the different property types in your database, and you can just add any other property types that you wish to the list here by hitting New and adding the property type. So let's say that I wanted to add the type convenience store. You can just add that there and hit OK. Apparently I already have added convenience store. So let's add gas station. So when I hit OK, well, I think I just screwed that up. All right, yeah. By the way, don't add a duplicate property type to your database because you'll have to hit cancel. So gas station. And hit OK. And that will be one of the options selectable from this list of property types now. Under the system tables, there's also the option for attachment types. So by default, it just has letter, business card, invoice, picture, PDF, and spreadsheet. And you can add like PowerPoint presentation or anything else that you want to be a selectable option when adding attachments to your database. You're also, I can't think of this coming up too often, but you're able to add different countries to your database as well. So now we're going to go to the project setup. Now, real quick, I'm going to actually go into projects to kind of explain what the project setup actually does. So when you have a project record in your database, there is a field here that says type. So these are the different types, and you can add to that type from that system table as well. So by default, it has for sale, for lease, buyer representation, tenant representation, and opportunity. The other two are ones that I created myself. And for each of these different types, you'll end up with a selectable list of statuses where it is currently in the pipeline. So if you drop down this box, since it's a for sale property, I have the for sale statuses as options: due diligence, out for signature, negotiating, offer received, and so on. However, if I were to change that to tenant rep, I would have completely different selectable options. I mean, due diligence is still there, but for sale / prospect is now an option. Space planning is an option, where space planning wouldn't be an option on a for sale property. So when you go to Tools, System Tables, and Project Setup, you'll see those different project types that show up in that list there. And then when you click on any given one, you'll see the different statuses that are available from the status drop-down box there. So when you click on one of these, if you add a new status, you're adding the status to that project type. So whichever one you're clicked on over here, if I'm clicked on buyer rep, when I add a new status, it's only going to add the status to that project type. So if I add something to buyer rep, it will not show up under opportunity or development or new listing or anything like that. So you can add a new project type here as well. Okay, so those are the options under System Tables. You can also customize a few things if you go to Tools and Options as well. So under Options, you can choose a few different options here. You can have it show time management on startup. This is where you can also choose whether or not to have it come up telling you that you want to save the changes every single time it pops up. So most of these are pretty self-explanatory. Events history, you can choose what time your day starts and ends at, so that'll show what the default view is on the calendar. So if you're on a daily calendar, by default for me, it's going to show from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you can also change the time slot size. So you can, if you have a lot of things that you schedule for like 5 minutes at a time, you have a lot of like phone calls that you schedule throughout the day, you might want to make that time slot size a little bit smaller, like 15 minutes, so it's a little bit easier to view. You can also select default colors for when you schedule events or create history records. This is nice if you want to be able to look at your calendar and be able to see who's scheduling an event on a multi-user version. So for example, I can choose, like, let's say brown for my events, although it looks much more like a red. And any events that I schedule are going to show up in brown. You can also set who the event participants are. So if you're on a multi-user version and you want everyone to be able to see the event, you might want to change your event participants to everyone here. Under the phone fax tab, now I'm not really able to go too much into the process for the auto dialer, but I know there is some interest in that. So with the phone dialer in REA, what you basically have to do is first set up your phone system to work with the Windows phone dialer, and you should be able to contact your phone manufacturer and tell them exactly what I just said. I need to know how to get my phone to work with the Windows phone dialer. Most phone systems, if they're voice over IP, are going to have a driver that you can install that they can provide for you that will automatically hook that up so your phone is set up through the Windows phone dialer. Once the phone is set up through there, your phone will actually be one of the selectable options in this drop-down list. And then anytime you're on a contact, you can hit the little phone icon next to their phone number to be able to call them and create a history of that phone call. I don't have it set up myself. My phone system actually does not support the Windows phone dialer, so I'm not unfortunately able to really ever go into that process. But you do just need to contact your phone manufacturer because we don't have that information for every phone system. There's hundreds of different phone systems out there, and we couldn't possibly have all of those for all of them. The user information tab. Now, when you do reports in REA or when you do mailers in REA, it can actually pull this information right from here. So if you run a report, by default, most of the reports have your information down at the bottom. Your information pulls from this section right here, where it's going to pull your name, title, company, address, and phone number and put them onto any reports you generate. So this is where that information gets pulled from. So I would definitely suggest everybody at some point in using REA goes to Tools and Options and just fills in the user information here. It might never come up, but it takes a few seconds to fill out, and then anytime you run a report, it's going to put your information in it, so if you ever have to print it out and give it to someone, you don't have to, affix a sticker to it or anything like that. So those are the general options as well. Before I kind of start delving in, I just want to kind of look here, see if there's anything I'm missing that I want to talk. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is changing fields and making it to where the fields are easier to view. I'm going to do this from properties. However, this can also be done from contacts, from projects. All of the fields in REA, you're able to change the name as well as the color. You see on my screen here, I have two of them that are kind of a salmon color and one of them that's yellow. That, in my opinion, makes it a lot easier to see which fields you find important, and you can actually kind of use that to group different types of fields together. So, like, for example, let me see what color I actually use so I don't, okay, so I used rosy brown. So I'm going to have, for example, all of my parking be that rosy brown color. And I'll do this a little bit slower so you can actually follow in a second. But you can kind of section off the different fields here and make it a lot easier to view at a glance. Not to mention, you can highlight in red any fields that you find important. And this can be done with all of the fields. So a lot of the times there's going to be fields that you don't necessarily need that we put into REA because some other people might need them. Uh, Commercial real estate is a greatly varied business, so I mean we have to kind of play to the lowest common denominator and include the most commonly used fields. But the truth is, nobody uses all of the fields that we include in REA. So there's going to be some fields between the general and details tab that you probably don't necessarily need. However, if you start running out of fields, there's also a set of 12 fields here under the user fields tab that you can use for your needs as well. Now, anytime you want to change the information on a field, you just right-click on the field, and you'll have a few options: sort, query, find, or properties. So if we click properties, that's how we brought that field properties up. So from here, we're going to see a few different things. First off is the field. This is going to have the original name on it. So because it's a property field, it's going to start off with property info and then separate with a period and then the original name of the field. So this field was originally named user1. I personally changed it to bicycle racks because something came over me and I decided, you know, I need to start tracking how many bicycle racks all of my properties have. Really weird example, but it's there. You can always just change the caption here, though, to meet whatever you need it to be. So, like, let's say I actually wanted to change this to number of bicycle racks. I mean, it's a little bit long and won't actually show up properly here. Then we can hit OK, and that'll change the field name there. And then you can change all of these fields here. Now, one thing to notice is on this window, when you go to the properties, is the data type. Now, this data type is not changeable, and that data type is what you're able to put into the field. So in this case, you see that it says varchar 50. What that stands for is variable, character, and then in parentheses, it has the length of the field, so how many characters you can fill in this case, 50. All of the user fields are this field type, VARCHAR, varchar 50. So that means that any keyboard characters are able to be inputted into that field. So, you know, general letters, numbers, stuff like that, or even weird symbols such as whatever that one is at the end there. Looks like a musical note. Now, if we go to some of the other fields that are already predefined, such as building size, and go to properties, we're going to see a different field type. In this case, it's INT, which, if you remember back to your math classes in middle school or high school, it stands for integer, meaning a whole number. So a field like building size is an integer field, meaning that it can only include whole numbers, meaning no decimals. So you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but nothing in between any of those. So for a field like that, if you didn't need, well, building size, I've never seen anybody actually change that, but if you were going to change that, you can only really change it to something that has only numbers inputted into the field. So if you, for example, wanted a date field, you have this transaction date that you could put in there and change the transaction date name to another field name. And if you right-click on that and go to properties, you'll see that the data type is date time. So date time meaning that it fills in with a date, and technically a time, but that's more on the programming end. So it's really, from your point of view, just a date. There's a question, do the field types change when you change the property type? They do not. These field types are the same across the board. It actually has to be that way. Unfortunately, I mean, that's a fantastic idea where each property would have different field types, or each property type would have different field types, but unfortunately that is not the case. So, I mean, there are a lot of limits to what you can actually customize in REA, so that's why I wanted to do this webinar, to let you know what is and unfortunately is not possible as well. Although some of the things that aren't possible, we are trying to find ways around that to change them in the future, but for right now, this is what can and cannot be done. So going back to this building size, if you try to enter letters into there, it's going to clear out the field. So you want to make sure with a field like building size or anything that's just a numeric value, you don't enter invalid characters. For date, you can just put any type of date in there. So like today's date, 2/24/2012. But if you try to put like any letters, it won't even let you type it in there. There's also, let me see, what other types of, improved is going to be another field type. Instead of integer, it's going to have the data type decimal. Now, decimal meaning, of course, you can have, 55.55. And it allows for, in the parentheses here, it shows you how many characters you can do. And it says 5.2, meaning that you can have 5 whole numbers, so up to 100,000, well, technically 99,999, and then have 2 decimal places. So if I wanted to get more exact than that, let's say it's 15.2222%, it'll automatically round in that case. So if I go here to the end and put 2255%, it'll round up to 15.23 in that case. So decimal fields can have don't have an unlimited number of decimal places. You can only have it, it'll only show a certain amount, but it is actually technically in there. Now, the thing I was talking about earlier was that you can also, when you right-click on a field, change the color of the field. Now, a few different reasons to do that is to create different, you can use different colors to for different field types. So like, for example, I have all of the parking fields in rosy pink here. I could do all of the different size fields, building size, usable square foot, vacant, acres, and lot size, and change those all to a separate color as well. So it's quick and easy to see at a glance which fields belong in which grouping, sort of. So it's a way to kind of group the fields together. Now, another thing I've seen a lot of people do that I think is actually not a bad idea is to put the fields that you find most important, highlight those fields with a different color. So, for example, let's say you don't ever want to have a field that does not have a parcel number. Well, I can right-click and go to Properties and make sure that that field stands out with kind of a bright color here. Let's go with, I'm trying to find a bright red that's not going to make it to where I can't read it. Let's go with magenta. So yeah, I'm definitely going to notice that that bright magenta color on the parcel number every single time, and it'll certainly compel me to fill that out, if for no other reason other than to hope against hope that that purple color will go away. Now, another way that you can make sure that you fill in those fields, though, is there's a few other checkboxes that I haven't talked about yet. So I'm going to talk about those right now. So the first one is tab stop. Now what that means is that when you're going into the fields and filling out the information, let's say building class, I'll just put A and hit tab to go to the next field. If tab stop is unchecked, it'll actually skip that field when you hit tab to go to the next field. So let's say I uncheck tab stop on location. And I'm just going to type an A into each of these because it's kind of hard to see my flashing cursor, I'm sure. So, and next, it skipped location, so I put A into each of those fields. The next option is warn user if blank. So going back to the parcel number, while the magenta color certainly makes it stand out, it's not going to necessarily make 100% certain that we fill in that field every single time. So we can check the box that says warn user if blank for any of the fields that we want to make 100% certain that we fill information into. So you're going to hit OK on that, and let's go ahead and wipe out that field and see what happens. So I go to save the record, and it brings up this pop-up window that says empty fields. The following field should have a field but has not, or should have a value but has not been filled in. So it'll give you a few options. You can still technically hit save changes and go on to the next record, ignoring this altogether, but it's going to be kind of, at least you know that you're doing it. You know that you have to actually hit a button to do that at that point. The other options are comma-separated values. So what that means is there's pop-up tables for some of these fields, and that means that you can select multiple different options. So, for example, a field like description, it has comma-separated values. Now, a pop-up table which is what I'm going to go into right now, allows you to have selectable information for a given field. So in this case, let's go ahead and go to construction type here. If we click on this little box on the right side of the field that pops up when we put our cursor in there, it's going to bring up a window that says pop-up table. Show us the field and then show us the different options that we have selectable to us. Now, the pop-up tables are nice because you don't ever have to worry about misspelling the information and thus make it easier to do a query on your information in your database. So, for example, if I select Play-Doh, well, I don't ever have to worry that instead of actually typing out Play-Doh, I might spell dough incorrectly. Stranger things have happened. So that pop-up table allows you to select options instead of having to type it each time. It's both a time saver and it makes certain that you're filling in the information consistently each time. So I'm just going to go ahead and select 2 of them. Now that comma-separated values is what allows me to select multiple. If it's a field that you're only going to be able to select one thing from, you actually want to uncheck that comma-separated values. So for example, let's say location. Location might be something that we only ever want to fill in one option from. I just filled in a bunch, so let's say these are like numeric codes. Well, I don't want to be able to select all of those, so I can right-click, go to Properties, and uncheck comma-separated values. So next time, you notice the checkboxes are gone from the right side. I can only just select one option at a time. So that's what that use comma-separated values means. You can also make sure for a field like construction type so you don't ever fill it in incorrectly. You can say must use pop-up table. So that means if I have a field that I have that selected on, I don't know if you can hear, but I'm trying to type and nothing's going in there because the only way I can enter information into there is by clicking on the pop-up table and selecting from the list. So that makes certain that the information entered into your database is consistent. I have a few more things I want to go over here in a moment, or over the next few minutes, as we are running short on time, and we actually do have another webinar at 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock Pacific time, 1 o'clock Eastern. So if you haven't signed up for that yet, you can go to our website and still sign up for that. I'll be doing that one as well. There is a question on, and this is actually probably one of the most common questions and has a really unfortunate answer. Can you make the bottoms and font? I'm not sure what the bottoms means, but no, you cannot make the fonts bigger. It's just the way that the program is programmed. The fonts cannot be changed on these fields, so they are as large as they're going to be, and they're going to take up the same percentage of your screen no matter what. So even if you make the screen larger, it's still going to take up the same amount of room on the screen. So there's not really a way to change that. And we've been looking into ways to change that for ages, but unfortunately that's not the case. Okay. Next I want to talk about real quickly changing the sort order of your database and also changing your entire view into kind of a spreadsheet view and choosing which fields you show. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 on my keyboard. Now there's 2 ways. I'm going to bring up a list of my properties, and there's 2 ways to do that. You can either go to View, Property List, or hit F5 on your keyboard. So from here you can actually change the sort order pretty simply and also choose exactly what you see in kind of a list view. So this makes it pretty easy to navigate your properties or your contacts all in one fell swoop. For the rest of the questions, I'm actually going to wait until after 9:30 to answer any of those. So go ahead and ask, but I will cover those after the webinar has completed. So probably like 5 minutes. So you can choose which fields using these drop-down boxes. You can choose different sort orders with the sort drop-down, or change your fields with the fields drop-down. So from any of the lists that shows fields, it's going to give up a selectable option of the different fields in the database. And from here, you can add the different fields that you want just by, on the left side here, selecting which one you want. So for example, let's say I want address to as well as parcel number. So you can customize this spreadsheet view to your likings, and then from here also export right to Excel. Kind of not exactly what this is about, but it's right there on your screen. You can always just export directly to Excel and change which view you're looking at. Now, whenever you see something in these column views, most of the fields can be, you can sort just based on that field just by double-clicking on the column header. If you hover over a column, it'll actually change the column header white with an orange underline. Just double-click, and it'll change the order based on that. So you can sort based on building size or APN, for example. The same thing goes when you're in time management. And that's where I'm going to kind of do the last section here is going to be on time management itself. There's a few different ways to customize your view in time management. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it to where I'm showing all of my schedule here, all in the past and all in the future. And when you double click on one of the columns, it'll sort based on that column. So you can like change it to ascending or descending based on the start date. And you can't really see it that well, but on the right of the field that you're currently sorted on, there is an arrow showing that's either pointing downwards or upwards. My screen is a little bit bright, so it's kind of difficult to see that, unfortunately. Now, let's see. Hold on one moment here. Now, you'll notice some of these event types have different colors to them as well. Now, when creating your event types through the system tables, tools, system tables, event types, you can actually assign colors to the different event types as well. Now, in this case, whenever I schedule a meeting, I have it set to where it'll show up in Firebrick. All of my follow-ups are in this sandy brown color, and travel is in this gorgeous chartreuse. So anytime I schedule a travel, I'll see it right on my schedule in that hideous green color. And you can change all of the different event types, so it's pretty simple to see at a glance what you have coming up. I mean, it's not usually going to be immediately pop into your head like, oh, okay, red definitely means meeting. But over time, you'll definitely start kind of getting used to that and be able to quickly look at your time management and see what you have going on without actually having to read every single thing on the screen. So that's a lot of this customization is useful for that purpose, in that it saves you a lot of time in looking around your screen much of the time. Okay, let's see, what else do I want to do? You can also change it to where you don't show the notes in the grid itself. So if you notice, it kind of changed what my entire view looked like there. So if any events have notes on them, it actually puts it on the bottom, the line directly underneath the event itself. And apparently, I'm going to actually have to do another one of these webinars because I actually am out of time and I have to start getting ready for the next webinar here in a moment after I answer the questions that you have asked. So come March, I'll say the first, let's say 2 weeks in March, I'll probably do another one of these sessions. I'll be a little bit more brief about the stuff that I did cover today, although some people weren't here for this one, will be at that one. And I'll go into some of the other stuff that some people have questions about and see what kind of feedback I get. So I'd like to actually do another webinar on this and possibly make it 45 minutes because this is actually the first time I've done the Customizing Views webinar. And so there's a lot more to cover. If you do have any questions on any of this, though, don't hesitate to give us a call. And I'm going to go ahead and start answering